4 other Buddhist centres. So really, really warm welcome if you're joining us from the Brixton Buddhist Centre or the Cambridge Buddhist Centre or Sheffield or Dublin. It's been really, really nice aspect of the retreat to have a sense of lots of different communities coming together. And maybe you're not, you don't feel quite like you're part of that community, but just by participating in this retreat, you're definitely, you've joined it. So yeah, and that's what I've really, really enjoyed about this retreat, is this sense of coming together. So as I was saying, we're on day 3 of the retreat, and day 3 is a very sort of particular time on a retreat. The practices really start to have an effect, actually. So we've been meditating, we've been hearing about the life of Milarepa, we've been connecting in groups together, and all of those things will start to deepen our experience. And, sometimes it's beautiful and sometimes it's uncomfortable. So you might, something difficult or uncomfortable might be sort of revealing itself. So don't worry, it's probably a fruit of practice. So what I'd really recommend is to stay engaged in the retreat, keep turning up, keep coming to the activities, and you really will learn to work with your mind, work with your heart, work with the experience of deepening. So I'm wondering how the sound is.
We'll move across to a new YouTube stream.
Okay.
It's been linked in the chat.
Okay, so what we're doing is we're moving this over to a new YouTube stream, which will hopefully help with our sound problem. So what you need to do is click the link which is in the chat, and you need to leave this YouTube stream and join another YouTube stream. I'm going to stay here, but but when you click on that new link, hopefully our sound issue will be resolved. So yeah, you need to. David, did they just click on the link and that'll just open up? So yeah, so just click on the link in the chat, open up the new YouTube stream, and I'll see you in another virtual porthole. Yeah.
Great, so you're live now in the other stream.
Okay. Oh my God, this is so surreal. So hello, welcome again. So welcome to the new YouTube link. So sorry about our sound problems. I'm hoping that this new stream, we set up the new YouTube stream, the sound's a bit better quality, and Xander's given me the thumbs up, so that's good. Good. Whew, okay. Wow. So what shall we do? Maybe we should just wait for a few moments just to let people sort of switch streams from the previous one. So that means I need to talk to you all a bit more. What shall I say, Subhadramati? Maybe, what shall I say? Well, you can hear me better now, so that's quite good. I know what I can say. I'll say a little bit about the format of this evening. So what will happen this evening is we're going to hear the next part of the story of Milarepa, so this Tibetan yogi who really faced a lot of adversity in his life. So Surya Gupta on Monday told us his life story, and Maitri Bandhu drew out a particular story, and tonight Subhadramati is going to draw out another aspect of this Tibetan yogi's life. And so that will happen in a moment. I'll pass over to Subhadramati. Then we'll have a period of meditation. Then there'll be a tea break. Then we'll come back together and hear a bit more of the story. And then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. So you can ask questions via the chat, and Subhadramati and I will respond to your questions. We're always careful to say that we won't answer the questions because we might not know the answers, but we'll definitely try and respond to as many as we can. And then what we'll do is we'll have a ritual. So we'll have a special short ritual, and we'll chant a mantra just like we've been doing each evening. And I'll read the verse that you've been hearing each evening from one of the songs of Milarepa. So one of the lovely things about Milarepa is that he taught and sort of expressed his realization through song. So it's really, really, really beautiful sort of mode of communication. Actually, that's what I could have done. I could have sung to you while I was trying to fill time, but maybe another time. Actually, yeah, maybe another time I will sing, actually. Okay, so what do we think? Shall I pass over to you, Subhadramati? How many people have we got with us now? 178. Okay, well that's a good number. So yeah, so welcome to all 178 of you, and I'm going to pass over to Subhadramati now for the next part of our story.
Good. So thank you all for being patient and agile at moving over from one stream to another. And thank you, Garbhavati, for just responding to one of those situations that happens on YouTube. I'm sure lots of you have been there in that sort of situation. So yes, so as Garbhavati said, I'm going to be talking for a bit, telling the next part of the story. Well, actually, I'm actually going back a step in the story of Milarepa, but I'll say why I'm going to do that in a minute. So do sit comfortably. You can just sit at ease just now. You don't need to sit in your meditation posture or anything. So good. So just to say, I hope that you've all got your free ebook of the Yogi's Joy. And it's so good, actually. I've been reading and rereading it. And this book is telling the story, telling many of the stories that we are drawing from on this retreat. Even if you're not on the retreat, if you're watching on YouTube or you're joining us later, everyone can get a free copy of this from Windhorse Publications. So just, why not? Get a free copy of this wonderful Dharma book. Good. So last night, Maitreya Bandhu was talking to us about befriending demons. He was telling us how Milarepa went home to his cave and found all these demons there, 5 demons with saucer eyes, and how he sort of converted them, really, befriended them and converted them. And one thing he said really, really struck me, and it's something that I've thought about many, many times in my own life and practice as a Buddhist, which is if you commit yourself, you will confront yourself. Yeah, so that's a wonderful aphorism, actually, isn't it? If you commit yourself, you'll confront yourself. In other words, the presence of demons appearing is a sign of progress. Yeah, it's a sign. The demons will only get interested when we are actually making progress. Yeah, if you commit yourself, you'll confront yourself. And so that was what Maitreya Bandhu was talking about last night. If you missed it, you can catch up with that. And what he did was he started in the middle of one of the episodes of the story of Milarepa. The story of last night, tonight, are stories before Milarepa's enlightenment. Surya on Monday told us the whole story of Milarepa's life, and then we're going back and looking at incidents. So Maitreya Bandhu started in the middle, and partly this was it was kind of a sort of practical, really, that it was Maitreya Bandhu's night last night and my night this night, and I thought Maitreya Bandhu would be particularly good at talking about the demons. So I said, you do the demon bit, Maitreya Bandhu, and I'll do the first bit the next night. So we sort of swapped it around. But actually, I think in a funny way, it's interesting because in some ways, this is an interesting story because you would almost think that the second bit of it, with the demons, would come first before the first bit of it, which I'm going to talk about, which is more about wisdom. And all week we've been talking about this trajectory from samadhi to prajna, from energized calm to wisdom. And usually we talk about it that way around, that first of all, you calm the mind, you subdue the demons, you befriend the demons, and from that calm, prepared mind, wisdom arises. Interestingly, in this story, it seems to be the other way around. The first thing that happens is a sort of something that becomes a wisdom practice and teaching. And the second thing that happens is these demons appear and need to be subdued. So I thought that's quite interesting. And I think what it shows is really that the Dharma life, any life as a sort of truth seeker, isn't linear. We don't just go along like climbing a set of stairs where one thing happens, then the next in a sort of straight line. So these things, they keep feeding back on themselves. You calm the mind and energize the mind in preparation for wisdom to begin to flower. But then on the basis of that wisdom, in a way, more demons are called forth to be pacified, and the mind needs to be calmed and subdued at a deeper level. And then on the basis of that, more wisdom arises. So I think that's what's happening here. So I realized actually maybe there was a slightly deeper, more intuitive reason why I thought, well, let's sort of swap this story round. Anyway, be that as it may, that is what we did. And so tonight I'm telling the first part of the story, and I'm just going to read you a little bit of it and then talk about it. Okay, so, and it's from a whole episode called Red Rock Jewel Valley, which is lovely, isn't it? The tale of Red Rock Jewel Valley. So here we go. Here's a bit of the story. So what we've got is Milarepa living as a hermit in a cave, and he's run out of food, basically. And he thinks, oh, I better go and get some wood and get some food and stuff. So it starts, he went out. But when he had gathered a handful of twigs, a sudden storm arose, and the wind was strong enough to blow away the wood and tear his ragged robe. When he tried to hold the robe together, the wood blew away. When he tried to clutch the wood, the robe blew apart. Frustrated, Milarepa thought, although I had been practicing the Dharma and living in solitude for such a long time, I am still not rid of ego clinging. What is the use of practicing Dharma if one cannot subdue ego clinging? Let the wind blow my wood away if it likes. Let the wind blow off my robe if it wishes. Thinking thus, he ceased resisting. But due to weakness, from lack of food, with the next gust of wind, he could no longer withstand the storm and fell down in a faint. So I'll stop there. I'm going to save the next little bit of the story for after the tea break, but I'll stop there and just talk a bit about, just in a way, some of the motifs from this story. It sounds very simple, doesn't it? A man goes out, he's got this robe, a loincloth, I'm imagining, ragged. He's trying to get somewhere, but then the storm blows up and he can't hold on to both things at once. Maybe you might already be starting to see the emblems here, the metaphor here. So let's look at a few of these motifs. So the first one, which actually I haven't got loads of time to say loads about, that's why I really encourage you to get the book, where Bhante Sangharakshita goes into this aspect more, is he's alone. He's living in solitude. He's not just alone, he's actually lonely. Now, those two things don't necessarily go together. You can be alone without being lonely. You can be lonely without being alone. But actually, Milarepa is alone and he is lonely. He's longing for companions. So that's the first motif, but that's the one I'm not going to go into really anymore this evening. But what I do want to draw out, and again, it's something that Bhante draws out, is Bhante really draws our attention to the fact that, yes, as I said, at this stage, Milarepa is not yet enlightened. He goes on to become enlightened. And very, very interesting why Bhante Sangharakshita, who's our founder and my own teacher, and his commentary, this book is The Yogi's Joy. what he draws out is, he says he's still very far from enlightenment. He said because he's not wearing clothes, or he is still wearing clothes rather. He's still wearing clothes. So that's interesting, isn't it? He's still at this stage wearing clothes. So what's the metaphor of wearing clothes? The first thing I thought, just on a very simple level, I was thinking about something about respectability. Especially because I'm imagining what he's wearing is a loincloth. Yes, so he's kind of covering himself up for decency. And I think it's really interesting, this thing about respectability. One of the things I really like doing, and I try to do every year, I haven't been able to this year because of lockdown and so on, is go on solitary retreat to the most remote place that I can find. And why I like to go to the most remote place that I can find, and I always take everything with me so I don't need to go out shopping or anything like that, is I really like to have at least a few weeks of my life in the year where I don't have to be decent, where I don't have to be respectable, where I don't have to be presentable for anyone. And there's something tremendously freeing about that. I really, really, I find that very, very valuable and very, very freeing. I remember the longest time I did this for was 2 months in the Spanish mountains. And I was staying in this little eco cabin. It was part of a retreat center called Eco Dharma. They were bringing up my food, but I never saw them, and they'd leave it in a special place. So I never had to go out, and it meant I could just be a bit wild. I didn't have to ever think of, I have to present myself. If I didn't want to wash my hair or wash my body, I didn't have to. I didn't have to worry about what I wore or if I wore anything or anything like that. And on the very last day, I sent a little note down to the community, and basically I invited myself for lunch. I thought it would be nice to meet them. Can I come for lunch? And I really noticed how I woke up in that morning and just thought, oh my goodness, I'm going for lunch. I better wash my hair. What shall I wear? Immediately those thoughts came crowding back in again, slightly as an oppression, although it was nice to see them and so on. Immediately I felt restricted by that. So I think there's something about giving ourselves, at least sometimes in our lives, where we don't have to be presentable, where we don't have to be respectable. I think that's the first sort of metaphor of clothing. But I think there's something deeper. Maybe that's not even a metaphor. Maybe that's just literal about clothing. But I think as a metaphor, I think we could ask, well, what do we clothe ourselves in? What do we sort of dress ourselves up in? And I was thinking, well, we dress ourselves up in our views. We dress ourselves up in our position. So we don't even know we're doing that. It becomes like literally the fabric of our being. We often only know that when we're challenged, when someone challenges, then we know when we know by how we rise up and we get kind of heated about our views, we get heated about our position, then we know in a way we've dressed ourselves up in it. The biggest challenge, of course, will be death. Death will be the biggest challenge to whatever we've clothed ourselves in, whatever position we've taken, because that will all go. It's like death's a kind of nakedness. That will all be taken away from us. It'll be completely irrelevant what our views have been, what position we've held. So I think we can already start practicing in that. We can already start practicing letting go. Whenever we notice ourselves becoming defensive, we can practice letting go. And it's not an absence. If we practice letting go like that, something much bigger can come in. that's what the image of the Buddha is trying to speak to us about. Under the Buddha, under the Bodhi tree, let go into vast mind, and whatever that means, we can't even really know what that means when I say let go into vast mind. I sound like I know what I'm talking about, but in a way I'm speaking poetically. Something more arises, just like the little freedoms that arise for me when I'm on solitary retreat and I don't have to be respectable. Something more arises when we let go. I remember on that retreat, Subhuti, who I see as one of my teachers, says it's really good for you, Subhadramati, to go away for a long time. I was away for 5 months altogether, 2 months of it on solitary retreat, 3 months on another retreat. And he said, because people will make decisions without you, you won't be able to have a say in everything. And a bit we thought, oh no, I love to have a say in everything. I always know what my opinion is on everything. And to just know that, well, life would go on without me. And I remember on that retreat thinking, oh, this is good practice for death, actually. I remember having that thought because I knew that back home at the London Buddhist Centre, people would be making decisions without me. I'd come back to change, and I did, actually. So that's the first motif, this clothing, this loincloth. And then, of course, we've got the motif of the storm, something dangerous, something out of control. And Milarepa concludes that it's actually demons who are behind the storm. And of course, as we heard last night, the demons appear as the hindrances to this calm, energized mind, or the coverings over this calm, energized mind. I wanted to sort of start exploring this a bit more deeply tonight, because what's behind, what's the source of these demons that appear like a storm is ego clinging. And we heard that term in the story, ego clinging. I want to say a little bit about what we mean by that, and in a way what we don't mean. It can sound a bit moralistic, I always think, when we talk about ego clinging, just that very word clinging, and also that word egos come to, I don't know, bandied around a lot as something moralistic, hasn't it? Oh, that's my ego, or I shouldn't have so much ego, or blah, blah, blah. It sounds moralistic, but in fact, in Buddhism, it actually isn't moral. This business of ego clinging isn't a moral issue. It's an existential issue. Jnanavasha this morning in his teaching, which is really worth giving a listen to if you weren't able to listen, because he was really going on to prajna teachings. He was talking about the root delusion that keeps us all trapped. And the root delusion that keeps us all trapped is that there's a real fixed, unchanging me in here, sort of participating, walking about in a real world out there. And that they're separate. Yeah, there's a real me in here, separate from this real world out there, but sort of walking about in it somehow, like you might walk about on a film set or something. But in fact, that's a delusion. But it's a delusion at the pre-conscious level, and we don't even know we're doing it. It's not something we're willfully doing, but while we are doing it, we're keeping ourselves trapped. And the Buddhist life is lived to sort of undo that delusion, to unpick it. And if and when we can do that, and the Buddha said we can all do it, then a whole new dimension of consciousness is discovered, something that we simply cannot imagine from where we are now. It's impossible to imagine it from where we are now. It's literally beyond our imagining. When that happens, we recognize that this whole sort of common sense experience we have of subject and object or ourselves in here and the world out there being seeming separate we'll recognize that that's been false all the time. It'll be like, I imagine it'll be like, oh goodness, I caused myself all that trouble all this time. And I didn't have to, yeah? So there'll be a sense of wonder at the realization and then wonder at the unfoldingness of that. So, and there'll be no more what we might call hindrances ever again. No more doubt will ever arise ever again. No more craving, no more hatred, resentment. Those things will be impossible because they only can come into being when there is this notion of a self and others. Like, if there's no, if that's dissolved, then what is there to crave? What is there to hate? What is there to hanker after? What is there to push away? That all just becomes completely irrelevant, yeah? Or even irrelevant isn't quite right, is it? It just becomes completely not, there's no way, it's completely not an issue anymore. I'll try and think of a sort of metaphor for that in the tea break, yeah? But I think the experience will just be, how silly I've been, how silly I've been. So that's what the Buddhist life is led to do, is to undo ego clinging. Yeah, but it's not a moral thing. We can work through ethics at loosening it up a bit, but in the end, it's not a moral, it's existential. So, yeah, I'm just, going to get a little help here. Thank you. So the very central motif of this story, of course, is this thing about the clothing and the sticks, yeah? You can really see it really graphically, can't you? This man in the mountains, you can imagine he's very skinny and completely disheveled and certainly not respectable in a way. The storm's blowing like anything. And just, it's very, very graphic. He's trying to hold on to the cloth. That means he drops the sticks. When he tries to pick up the sticks, that means he's, he can't hold on to the cloth anymore. As a matter of fact, it sounds a little bit like me when I come down to the Buddhist Center every morning with my laptop. I try and come down holding my laptop, my cup of tea, my phone, you can open the door at the same time, It's somebody trying to do everything at once, somebody trying to hold it all together. And I think the motif, the metaphor is, well, it's really of our lives, isn't it? Our life can seem like our whole life is spent trying to hold it all together. It's a sort of tragedy, isn't it? That's how we spend our life. I don't know about you, but, I can feel like, if I can just get to the bottom of my email list, then I'll be able to relax. Then I'll be sort of in control of everything. But of course, you're trying to get to the bottom and more are coming in, and you're trying to just get it all together. There'll be different ways we're trying to juggle everything and get it all together. And we can end up thinking that that's what life is, that life is just a matter of trying to hold it all together and then we'll die, which seems a bit of a tragedy. So I think it's very, very graphic, this very, very central motif of trying to hold on to everything at once and realizing that's impossible. Sometimes we manage it, don't we? Maybe even quite a lot we manage it, and we think, oh good, I've just, I've got it under control, I got all my emails finished before I went on retreat or went on holiday, oh good, that's good, nobody will be cross with me. So sometimes maybe even often we manage it, but sometimes it starts to fall apart. The solidity of our experience, or the seeming solidity, seems to dissolve. Yeah, our usual reference points aren't there anymore, and And I was thinking this is particularly apt for us at the moment, kind of well into this whole pandemic situation. We've had the whole lockdown. We think nobody knows what's going to happen. And how have we been dealing with this? What I noticed for myself is I got a bit thrown the other day because in Britain anyway, it looks, I haven't completely followed it, but luckily some other people at the Buddhist Centre are on top of it. But anyway, from what I understand, there's going to be a bit more restrictions on us at the Buddhist Centre than they already were. We looked like we're moving towards, we can start to open the physical doors and some people can come and we can have our first retreat maybe with a few people on it. And I was saying, oh, good, we're going in the right direction. We've, done everything online. We've really risen to that challenge. We've done this. Now we're opening the doors and some people come back. And then some more legislations come in and said, no, you can't do that. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, that's not fair. And very, very interesting. That was the bit that threw me. And I thought, that's interesting, Subhadramati. Why did that throw you? I mean, yes, on one level, you might say, it's not fair, blah, 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 and you can complain about the government or, I don't know, say this or that, which I have been a bit, possibly ranting a bit. British laughing. She was one of the people I was ranting with. Maybe then a way that even complaining is a way of trying to get sort of control back again. Because you think, if I was in charge, that's not the way I would do it. I just think it's very, very interesting what we do. Sometimes we think we're being quite good, but then a little tiny setback happens and you realize you've been bargaining all along. That's what I'm trying to say. Maitreya Banda was talking about that last night as well. You think, I've been bargaining all along. I think, okay, if we do everything right and good, then somewhere along the line, a reward will come and that will be all great. And then actually, if something doesn't follow that plan, I know I can feel a sort of sense of outrage or almost sort of shock. And I start to, well, in my case, in this instance, started to complain. And, I think it goes very deep that I had a dream the other night. I dreamt that I was about to die. I dreamt that I was in the top of a very high-rise building, and suddenly I looked out of the window, and I noticed that the whole building was swaying like this. I was on the phone to somebody, the phone went dead, and I looked out, and the building was swaying. And as the building was swaying, I thought, gosh, like I'm going to die. And immediately I thought, no, that can't be right. I'm still too young to die. And then in the dream still, I rationally had to say to myself, but Subhadramati, I think this is it. Anyway, it was just a dream and I didn't die, but it was interesting, just a dream myself. But there was that kind of, no, that can't be right. It reminded me of that scene in War and Peace. I can't remember the young soldier, but he's about to be killed and he says, no, I can't die. Like, I'm my mother's favorite, we try and bargain with reality. I remember when my father died years ago, I was absolutely, sorrowful, of course, but sort of sorrowful, but strangely okay. And then a few months later, his brother, my uncle, died. And that was the thing that threw me, because I was thinking, no, hang on. Like, we've had our death in our family. Like, you can't give us another death, whoever you are. So the reference points were pulled away. So probably we've all got our own examples of that. And I think this pandemic is an example of the reference points being pulled away. We're not in control. And we might think we're all right, but then a little thing happens and we find ourselves outraged or complaining, or we find ourselves sort of stoical, and we might think, okay, I'm going to be patient. Oh yes, I'll reflect on the Dharma. All things are impermanent. But I'm not sure that that's really what the Dharma actually deeply is. It's not just a matter of saying, oh, all things are impermanent, I'll just bear with this. I think there's a much deeper way to look at it, which is an opportunity for liberation. And I think that means that we've got to sort of go with we've got to feel the storm, yeah? We've got to feel the storm. Otherwise, what we think is the Dharma, what we think is Buddhism, is actually just a sort of quietude, a sort of stoicism in the wrong sort of way. I read something Bhante said recently. I'd read it before, but it really struck me again. He said that sometimes when people say they aren't frightened of death, he said that he thinks it's not so much lack of fear of death as lack of imagination. And that really struck me, actually, because, well, it struck me as true, because I think, well, personally, I think, well, what do I think? I want to sort of stick to my own experience and maybe not try and sort of say something about other people. Well, I know that as I've gone deeper in my practice of meditation, I've realized that fear of death is very, very deep. I remember when I was on that same solitary retreat, touching on that. I remember I started to more and more realize that the person whose death I cared about the most was my own. And that was quite shocking, because I realized that for all I might profess to love, my family, my boyfriend, my, dear like nieces and nephews, that actually, when it came down to it, when I was really in touch with it, I remember thinking, they can all die as long as I don't die. The person I don't want to die, it's even a bit shocking to say it, very kind of feels almost unright to say that, but that was the thing I touched on. The person I least want to die is me. If it really was a choice between them and me, actually, the person I don't want to die is me. And I was quite shocked at that. But what I realized is I probably touched onto something very, very deep and very, very primal. And that's the thing that we're trying to transform with our Dharma life. It's almost like that very sort of fight or flight instinct itself has to be transformed. And that fight or flight instinct is definitely pre-conscious. To transform that that's going to take very, very deep work, yeah? But that's what we're looking to transform. We're addicted to our experience of being a me. It's not just that we're clinging to it, we're addicted to it. That's why we are a me. If we weren't frightened of death, we wouldn't be here, because we wouldn't have sort of been reborn as a me, unless we're some great bodhisattva that's come to save all beings. If we weren't frightened of death, we wouldn't be a me. I'm a me because I'm addicted to the experience of being embodied. How am I going to undo that? I can begin to start to undo it by doing something like Milarepa does in this incident, where he loses his cloth and his wood. He takes his mindfulness much deeper than we usually think of mindfulness, and he sees and feels that it's because it's his cloth and his wood that he's so attached to it. In other words, he's made that cloth part of him. He's made that wood part of him. And he sees that very, very deeply. In other words, he sees the depth of that self-clinging. He sees that self-clinging sort of breaking the surface of his being. and sees his own holding on and his own defensiveness, and he's able, he relinquishes that, and he falls down in a swoon. So I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to hand back to Garbhavati, who's going to take us into a meditation and perhaps exploring a little bit more about letting go in the meditation. Then we'll have some tea, and then I'll come back and say what happens next after the swoon.
Thank you, Subhadramati. That was wonderful. So yeah, what we can do now is we can look at where we cling in our own experience. We don't need to sort of be up in the mountain just wearing a cloth and trying to gather wood to notice where we're holding on. We can do it right now when we sit to meditate. So we'll have a short period of meditation which I'll guide us in. And what I'd really encourage us to look at is I'll be guiding us through the body and guiding us to the breath. And you can just notice in your own experience where you're gripping on. You'll feel it as tension. You might notice it as a distraction. And then when you notice you're distracted, come back to your body and look for where you're holding on. And that holding will be painful. And see if you can just notice that holding and just see what happens. If you can stay with it, it might change. And there might be something on the other side of that holding. You might even be able to let go a little bit of that holding on in the body. So just set yourselves up comfortably for meditation. If you're sitting on a sofa, just bring a cushion to the small of your back so you can sit up nice and tall. Have your feet flat on the ground. And if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, just let your eyes close. And just allow the weight of your body to sink down towards the ground. So your feet or your legs sinking down. And the weight can drop down through your sitting bones to the cushions or the chair. And let yourself relax into the sense of stability from the ground. Are you gripping in your thighs? Are you holding your body up a little? Can the weight release a little more down? From that sense of grounding, just feel the natural curves of your spine rising up, supporting the body. And the head just balancing on the top of the spine, the neck free. Your shoulders can just drop a little down your back. As you breathe in, let your chest and your belly soften with the inhale. And as you breathe out, shoulders relaxing down. And bring your attention down into the belly and just feeling the breath down in the belly. And see if you can get a little bit closer to the direct sensations of the breath. And this thing that we call breath is a constant changing flow of sensation. Can you feel it in your body? And when you get distracted, relax a little. Come back to the body and look for where you might be gripping or holding on in the body. And breathe into that. See if it changes. And again, if you get lost in thought, notice if you're grasping after a different experience or pushing your experience away, bargaining with reality. Include the body and the breath. And just start to broaden out through the whole of your body. And just notice, is there anything in your direct experience which is fixed and unchanging? Anything you can really grasp hold of? And then start to broaden out beyond your body and just taking in the sounds you can hear in the room. And when you're ready, just start to bring the practice to a close. Okay. So we'll just have a little break now. So you've got time to have a cup of tea or go to the loo. And we'll break for about 8 minutes. So we'll be back just after around 8:05.
Okay, good. So we're back. Okay, so welcome back, everyone. So good. So, oh yeah, first thing, little technical thing. If you're having problems with your sound, all you have to do is press the refresh button and then you should be fine. So just do that. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to speak for a few minutes more, just telling us the story to the end. And then Garbhavati and I will both come, and it's a chance for you to ask us questions on, what the story's been tonight, what I've been talking about, and we'll try and respond. So you might already be thinking of some questions. You can put them in the chat box, and then we'll end with our ritual. Good. So we left Milarepa. He was in a swoon, and I'll just read what happens after that. So he fell down in a faint. Yeah? When he came to, the storm was over. High up on the branch of a tree, he saw a shred of his clothing swaying in the gentle breeze. The utter futility of this world and all its affairs struck Milarepa, and a strong feeling of renunciation overwhelmed him. So that's the end of that part of the story. So I think it's very interesting. Just this faint, that he falls in a faint. So what has happened just before the faint is he's realized that he can't hold on to both the wood and the clothing. And instead of complaining about that, instead of even sort of stoically bearing it, instead of just being patient with that fact, he actually let something go deeper, and he realized that actually what he was clinging on to was a sense of me and mine. So in other words, he used this difficulty and used this reaction, if you like, to sort of expose his ego clinging. Usually our ego clinging isn't exposed to us because, we're just going around we just don't realize it because it's just our common sense. It's just our common sense experience of the world, and also we when things go wrong, we usually blame somebody, the government, the other person, the weather, or whatever. But Milarepa took this much deeper, and it's almost like he asked himself, why am I reacting? Okay, this has all gone wrong, can't keep the cloth in the wood, something has happened, but why am I getting stirred up about it? What am I defending? And he realized, in a sense, that all he's defending is a pattern of defensiveness. And on that realization, as something lets go. Yeah, when you realize that all you're defending is a pattern of defensiveness, something lets go. You can't think your way to that. It's a wisdom experience. Yeah, it comes through practice, and it comes through being willing to ask yourself that question: why am I reacting? No matter how no matter what the other person's done, maybe they have been unskillful. Sometimes I think to myself, well, they probably have. You might as well think the other person who's annoyed you, or the other people, or the government, whoever, maybe they are in the wrong. That's not really the issue. The issue is, why am I reacting? What's at stake that's making me sort of boil up like this? What am I defending? And if you can deeply ask yourself that question, you can realize that actually, what am I defending? That you realize that is what I think I'm defending is, that's the best way I can put it. It's just a pattern of defensiveness. It's like, when you whirl around a sparkler and it looks like it's actually a circle of fire, but actually there's nothing solid there. That's what we are. We're just this whirring around thing, and what's whirring around is our pattern of defensiveness. It's a little bit like, I don't know whether to say this or not, but I think I'm allowed to say it since I was part of it. I think on the first day, there was for about 5 minutes in the chat box in one of the sessions, there was a little sort of argument going on, like, should we have chat? Should we turn it off? No, we don't want to make too many rules, da 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 da. And then Michael, one of our crew, one of our helpers, he said, all the chat was about whether to have the chat or not. And I thought, that's what I mean by all we're defending is our pattern of defensiveness. All our defensiveness is just about whether to be defended or not. When we see that, like, we laugh, we can let go with laughter. So that's what Milarepa starts to see. And then he falls into the swoon. So it's very interesting because you could say the swoon, the faint, is an even further letting go. I mean, usually we sort of privilege our waking consciousness as the important, that's the important thing. But there's no reason why, our dreams, our mind, our mind of meditation, it's sort of no less real and no more real. It's just as real and just as unreal as our waking consciousness. But usually we sort of privilege that. We think that's the important thing. That's the thing we're sort of attached to, actually. We're attached to the contents of our mind. We think that's the important thing, and we fear losing that. But actually, we will lose it, actually. So we might as well. It's almost like we need to get used to that and see, well, actually, that's not the only thing. Maybe that's the best way to put it. That's not the only thing. And I think this falling into a swoon, into a faint, that's a further letting go, because even the waking consciousness, even the contents of the mind that we think we can control, they're let go of. In the swoon, the mind has become unbound from its contents. And when he awakes from this, what he sees is the rag fluttering in a tree. Isn't that beautiful? It's fluttering in a tree. And I was talking to my friend Esther the other day about this. I hope she's listening, Esther, either now or maybe later. And she said, oh, it's like a prayer flag. And I thought, oh, yes, that's amazing. What he's held on to has become a prayer flag. It's become an offering. And I thought, that's the key. Yeah, there's a key here. Because an offering is, if we make an offering to the shrine, or we might make an offering to a person in a way, a present is a kind of offering. But say we'll make an offering to a shrine, is we make something as beautiful as we can, and then we give it up. Then when we make an offering to a shrine, we give that to the shrine. And I think there's something quite mysterious happens there. I remember my strongest experience of this happened on another very, very early retreat. I've told that story before, but it's quite a strong experience. I made a very, very elaborate offering. Well, I was in the process of making a very, very elaborate offering where I was writing this whole puja book and illustrating it. I remember I was putting pictures of swans swimming on lakes and lotuses and jewels, and I was illustrating this all and doing it in calligraphy. And my plan was that I was going to make this whole puja book, and at the end of the retreat I was going to offer it to the shrine, and offering it to the shrine meant that it was going to be burned. Yeah, I was going to burn it at the end. And what I noticed was that as I was making it, having in mind that in the end it would be consumed by the flames, what I noticed was I made a little mistake. I was doing the calligraphy. If you've ever done it, very easy. I made a mistake, and I thought, oh, never mind, it's going to be burned anyway. And then I thought, no, come on, Subhadramati. I don't even know if I was Subhadramati there. I don't know if I was a dream, but I thought, come on, no, be disciplined. Do a new page. So I tore out that page and I did it again. So at first, knowing that it was going to be burned, it was a discipline to make it beautiful. The bit of my mind was just going, oh, never mind, who's going to know it's going to be burned? But gradually what happened was it stopped having to be a discipline, and it just became a thing in itself. It just took a life of its own. I just wanted it to be beautiful, just for its own sake. The fact of it being burned just stopped being relevant. That was neither here or there. Something sort of new came into being so that I could somehow let this thing be as beautiful as it wanted to be and let it be consumed by the flames. And I remember on that very early retreat thinking, this is how I must live my life. I must live my life as an offering. So that memory came back to me when I thought of this loincloth, this last bit of clothing in Milarepa that he couldn't hold on to. He was trying to hold on to it. He couldn't hold on. It becomes a prayer flag. It becomes an offering. So what I thought was, even if, the sort of pranya teachings maybe if they seem a bit beyond us, and we think, well, what does this mean to see through the distinction between a real self in here and a real set of others out there, even if that seems beyond us, even if that seems, well, how could you do that? Even if the practice of taking our reactions as a clue to ego clinging, as a clue to, well, that's ego clinging breaking the surface. Even if that seems beyond us, even if we think, how could I do that? Then what you could do is just try and live your life as an offering. Surrender to something bigger. That we then would become bigger than the subject-object duality. Just surrender to something bigger. Later on, we're going to be doing a short ritual. And when we do a ritual, we can surrender to that, yeah? It's surrendering, we're surrendering as an individual. We're not surrendering our individuality. We're surrendering as an individual to something much bigger than this sense of a real me in here and a real world out there. We're surrendering to beauty, if you like, surrendering to truth, surrendering to goodness. So I thought maybe that's where I'd leave us with, as the story leaves us with, this rag fluttering in the tree like a prayer flag, like an offering. So whatever we're clinging to, which in the end is our very selves, our very sense self, turn that into an offering. And in a way, then we can't go wrong. That's all we have to do. Yeah. Good. So that's all I'm going to say just now. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to rearrange ourselves. I'm going to move over. Garavavati is going to come and sit a little bit away from me, as is customary. And then we are going to hopefully hear some questions from you and respond to them. Let's make sure we can both still be seen. We're both still on camera, Britta?
We come in.
Okay. Okay, it's hard to get this quite right. Okay, is that good?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
It's a bit closer.
Oh, yeah. Good. Good.
Okay, so please do write if you've got any questions, particularly questions about what Subhadramati has been talking about this evening, the story of Milarepa, about self-clinging, about letting go of what we hold on to. If you've got any questions, please do ask them in the chat, and Xander's going to feed us the questions. So have we got anything just yet, Xander?
We've got a question from Oliver, who's asking whether the ultimate offering that we could make to the Buddha is ourselves.
Okay, so let's try. So that's in a sense you could say. Good question, Oliver. So I think I like that notion of thinking of our lives as an offering. When we're offering it to the Buddha, in a sense, it's not that anything's been lost. It's not like self-sacrifice. It's something like perhaps devoting ourselves, and offering ourselves to the Buddha means devoting ourselves to the ideal of growth and transformation for all beings. So we could give our lives to that. We could give our lives to help the growth and transformation of development of all beings. That would be giving ourselves, going for refuge, as we say to the Buddha. I don't know if you've got anything to add.
No, I don't think I do. I think that's good. That's enough. Yeah.
We've got a few questions about letting go. Some questions around what would be some initial steps to let go, and then another question around whether the letting go has a momentum of its own and kind of builds over time.
Oh, that's interesting.
I think it's very interesting. Yeah, that's good. So the questions about letting go, what would be first steps, and then if it builds momentum over time. So this whole story really is about renunciation. Interestingly enough, although Bante's commentary is very much on this, what Bante Sangharakshita is also very keen to say is to always be sure that we're letting go into something. Yeah. So in a way, we let go into more fullness, more beauty. What we don't want to become is a sort of martyrs, basically. We don't want to become sort of self-sacrificing, I've got to give everything up and be sort of poor and austere. In a way, renunciation is renunciation towards more richness. So if you think of it like that, more what will happen of things will sort of drop away. Things that hold us back will drop away. So maybe first steps are looking at actually what have I outgrown? What's holding me back? It's really interesting when you have an honest look at that. Sometimes our idea of what we even enjoy and what we actually enjoy, if we're honest with ourselves, isn't the same. We're often influenced by other people, aren't we, or by society over what we should enjoy. So maybe the first step is to take an honest look at, well, what does make me happy? And then things that you might start to feel ready for other things to drop away.
Yeah, I was thinking what you're saying reminded me of a personal anecdote. Where I was thinking you can also think about it in terms of growth, that actually we grow and we develop and things fall away. But I was thinking for myself, when I first came to the Buddha Center and I was 25, and not long after I started to meditate, I was turning 26, and I planned this really nice 26th birthday party, which was going to be a cocktail party with lots of my friends, and we'd bought all the alcohol and invited all the people. And I'd probably been meditating for about 2 months. And when it came to the party, I just didn't want to drink. And I sort of didn't want to drink, I think, because I'd established a meditation practice. And I mean, I don't know, it's just this, normally I would want to really drink, but I just wasn't interested. So it was this interesting thing of, I didn't think, oh, now I'm going to give up alcohol because I'm going to be really holy. I didn't want to drink. And it was an interesting feeling because I was almost slightly disappointed that I wasn't going to have this party, but actually, I guess it was like a bit like sort of growing or letting go despite myself, or despite wanting to sort of carry the momentum of I don't know, partying, had just lost its appeal.
That's interesting. Yeah. I've got a question I forgot about it. What did your friends think of that?
Yeah, well, I can remember one of my friends saying, oh, like, come on, don't you just want to get drunk and make some bad decisions? And I was like, no, thanks. So yeah, I think there can be, it can be challenging, like for people that we love. I found it, I think some of my friends felt affronted by me changing. But also another thing I noticed is actually people don't really care that much. Like actually, in one way people care, but in another way it's not such a big deal, is it? If one, someone's doing something a bit different.
There's a question about letting go of some of the more challenging emotions like resentment and how to go about doing that, and also whether letting go is a passive activity or actually something more engaged and active and thoughtful.
Okay, so that's or did you want to go first?
No, I was thinking you had that thing about active mind.
Oh yes, yeah. So okay, so it's maybe I just say the question in case I ever didn't hear. So letting go of more difficult things like resentment, and whether letting go is passive or active. I think everything in the Dharma is active, actually, and even receptivity is active. So I think letting go is an active thing, although sometimes it's as Garbhavati described, it's a natural thing. So yes, what about letting go of resentment? What about forgiveness? They're hard. What I try and do with resentment is, the first step, I think, is, acknowledging to myself that I am feeling it. But what I try and do with resentment is looking at it as a clue. So if I realize if I'm feeling resentful, it shows to me that there's something not fulfilled in my own life. If I'm feeling fulfilled, actually it doesn't matter what other people are doing. If I'm feeling resentful that, I don't know, somebody else seems to be not working as hard as me, that's often the one I get resentful about. I think, how come I've got to do all the work around here, they're having a nice time. Actually, I realize there's nothing to do with that other person. That's a clue. Subhadramati, it probably just means you need to have a little rest or have a little break. It's saying something about me, and I know that now, because if I am feeling happy and fulfilled and my work's just an expression of my love in a way, then I'm perfectly happy if someone else is sitting on the sofa reading poetry. They're enjoying what they're doing, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. So I try and treat resentment like a clue, and that helps me to let go of it. So I think, again, letting go, it's not that you're forcing yourself to do something. It's seeing these as a clue to what's going on with me. Why am I annoyed? Why am I outraged? So, maybe somebody said something very difficult. It's not that you've got to try and make yourself agree with them. It's not that you've got to condone what they've done. Maybe they have done something unskillful. Maybe they really have hurt you or hurt someone else. But the more question is, why am I reacting? And realizing that's an extra thing I'm doing that doesn't, it doesn't help, but it's showing me something about myself. I hope that's responded to the question. It's quite. This is where I love to, whoever has asked the question, I'd love to sort of have you here, and then we could talk about it a little bit more. But I don't know if you've got anything to add.
The only thing actually I was going to mention is what you actually quite often say to me when I get into a bit of a strop and I'm complaining to Subhadramati, and she says, "What are you making this mean about you?" So it's like, what do I make the other person's insult mean about me? And usually that's the most painful thing.
Yeah.
I think that's quite a helpful question to ask oneself.
Yeah. Sometimes one thing that Garbhavati and I often say to each other, if we find ourselves reacting in some way, we actually say, this is an opportunity for insight.
Oh, yeah.
And as soon as I say this is an opportunity for insight, for wisdom, for prajna, strangely enough, immediately that softens it. Even saying that to myself, it turns it into something a bit exciting rather than something annoying, or rather than something that I think is holding me back. I think maybe that's the key thing, is we can think that something somebody's doing is stopping us from being creative, stopping us from Dharma practice, but actually that's impossible. There's nothing that anyone can do that can stop us, at least in theory, being creative. Of course, in practice, it's very, very difficult, especially if someone's causing us harm or hurt. But there is actually nothing that can mean that we can't be creative. There always is that potential. So I think that's a really key thing.
And just to build on that, is there something about it's active, not passive, which points back to what Subhadramati was saying in her talk, which was, it's not just a stoic putting up with impermanence or suffering. It's using those experiences as opportunities, as gateways to liberation.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So it's not just like, oh, just grin and bear it because everything's impermanent and this is going to end soon. That's not really going to get us anywhere, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've got someone online who says, so Pippa says she jumps at the tiniest thing. And is it possible to let go of some of those more inbuilt kind of human fight or flight kind of reactive modes that we all live in to varying degrees?
Oh, so that's interesting. So I'm guessing that means almost like physically jumps at the tiniest thing. Yeah, well, I'm quite interested in this because that is a sort of fight or flight thing. And that's very, very deep. We'll never be able to change that by an act of will. But presumably that doesn't happen for a Buddha. And I remember hearing that Bhante said once that the will to enlightenment, the urge to enlightenment, in the end becomes stronger than the will to live. That doesn't mean that we wish to die, of course, because that's just another form of grasping. I think what it means, and I asked Subhuti, who, again, as I mentioned, was a teacher I look up to, I said, does that mean that even the fight or flight instinct is transformed? And he said, yes, but that's what we call turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness. We'll never be, you can't actually really practice for that to happen. You'll never be able to make that happen with our conscious mind. But all I can think of is that we can trust that even in the end, that will be transformed. So don't worry that you jump at the smallest thing from a dharmic point of view. That's not you doing anything wrong. It's more, to me, I've come to think it's quite exciting because I think, gosh, if that force can even be transformed, that's when I started to think of maybe enlightenment is a bit like splitting the atom or something that human beings never thought could happen, can happen, and a tremendous amount of energy would be unleashed. So if you could transform even that fight, or even if that could be transformed, crikey, what an amount of energy. But don't even think of trying to do that because you won't be able to do it by trying. But at some point, transformation at that deepest seat of consciousness will happen somehow. We don't know how, but I more and more think it will happen. Do you?
Wow. Well, I was thinking, well, if we keep practicing in a way and working on our ethical, if we keep working on what we can work on, then then hopefully it will. Yeah.
I think the image is like we practice on the level we can. Another image that's often used is a lightning conductor and lightning. So all our practice is like putting up the lightning conductor, but we can't force the lightning down out of the sky. But what we can do is erect the lightning conductor, and then when lightning may strike, if there's no lightning conductor, then lightning will never strike. But we can disturb it. Maybe it's a bit like on a kind of more ordinary level. It's a bit like, in creative things, people talk about the muse. So it's a bit like you can't force the muse to appear if you're trying to write a poem or paint or create a visual art. But you can do your bit, and then the muse might appear. So when we're talking about turning around in the deepest seat of consciousness, it's a bit like that. It's a bit like that same sort of thing of the muse might appear and the poem might write itself. But you can't make that happen. If you try and kind of go, okay, muse, where are you? She's going to run a mile, isn't she? That's the last way to make her appear. So yeah, that's that's the best I can say on that. Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, or we can say, yeah.
There's a question around how a crisis or a storm seems to really help expose the ego, and how important that is in along the path. There's another way.
So the question is, a crisis and a storm sort of exposes ego clinging, and how important is that along the path? So it's almost like I've got two responses that are opposite. One is, I think, on one hand, I think, well, you don't need to, well, what do I want to say? Well, maybe actually, I'll say the second thing of what I was going to say. I think for me, it's always been important to try and keep putting myself in crucial situations in order for transformation to happen. So I must say when I say crucial situations, that sounds really grandiose, just taking responsibility, just saying, I don't know, I'll come and talk this evening about quite a difficult subject, a bit of me today saying, why did I ever say I'd do this? And like, it's really hard and I don't know if I'll be able to say it, but I've committed myself, so then you do it. And then, that does, exposes something about me, and then it gives you material to work with. So I think it's good in life and in the Dharma life to keep putting yourself in situations of intensity. Look for situations of intensity. At the same time, and this was the other bit of my response, life will usually provide them anyway. Even if you don't look for situations of intensity, life crises will come. I mean, in a way, we're all really in a crisis just now with this pandemic. So life has provided that for us. But if we think we're getting complacent, we can look for situations of intensity. And it's not just that you have a situation of intensity; you have to use that. Subhuti, who I've mentioned a few times today, he said the virus is our guru. Right at the beginning of this pandemic, he said the virus is our guru. It's our guru if we allow it to be. If we just complain, or if we just kind of stoically bear it, or if we just think, when's life going to get back to normal, then the virus won't be our guru. But if we let it be our guru, if we see that this is giving us an opportunity, if we take it as an opportunity, then it will be. So maybe crises themselves, it's not that maybe I'm getting at what I'm trying to say. It's not that pain and difficulty is in itself a good thing, but if we allow it to be, then it can be a teacher. And we can actually actively look for that, especially if we think we're getting a bit complacent. Yeah.
Great.
You can do the next one.
I think those are the main ones. There was a question earlier about abandonment from the world and how to stay in the world and not relinquish our responsibility.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, I think it's quite relates actually probably to what we're saying about taking responsibility, because I don't know, for it's probably different temperaments are different, but for myself, the idea of just letting go of all worldly responsibility is really appealing, because life's complicated, it's difficult, but actually, we need to learn how to be robust and sort of be in the world, and that's where we come into relationship with other people, where we come into relationship with complexity, and it's where our ideas sort of get tested in a way. So for myself, I might be meditating in the morning, doing the Metta-Bhavana, the loving kindness meditation, and I live with 11 other women, and I might be bringing them to mind and feeling really like in positive states and really loving. And then I lead the meditation, I go to the kitchen, and there's loads of washing up to do. It's really, really messy, and I suddenly get into this negative mental state about, who's done that then? And in a way, if I was completely removed, I wouldn't be exposed to that part. So there's something about bringing our practice into the world and not becoming sort of precious actually about our states of mind, or precious about what we do. The conditions that we're in have a really big effect, and it's important to take that seriously. And it's really important to well, to be in the world and relate to people and not sort of wrap ourselves up in cotton wool. So I think that is really important. And in a way, what we're trying to abandon is a sense of a sort of false sense of security that we might look to worldly things for. So we might look to our job or our relationship or our status or our health or our beauty. We might look to those things to bolster ourselves up, to get a sense of security. So it's not that we abandon our partner. It's not that we abandon our family. It's not that we stop taking care of ourselves and buying nice outfits from Llama's Pajamas, but it's that we abandon going to those things to sort of bolster up our sense of selves. We see them for what they really are. We see their nature, that they're ultimately, they won't satisfy our heart's longing, that they won't last. So we engage on that basis. So we're sort of in the world deeply, fully, wholeheartedly, but we're not sort of the world in a sense of getting a sense of confidence and security from those things, because it doesn't work.
Yeah, brilliant.
Have you got anything to add, Subhadramati?
I think that was very good.
Okay, so maybe we've got time. Is there one more question, Xander?
One's just come in.
Oh, yeah.
Which one Dharma text or teaching has inspired you to keep going?
Oh.
Let's think. Have you got anything on the top?
Yeah, I have actually. I really like this teaching of the marks of existence, and the Dhammapada, which is a very sort of old traditional text. I go back to again and again, and maybe I could recite the verses. So it's all conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with insight, one grows weary of suffering. This is the path to purity. All conditioned things are painful. When one sees this with insight, one grows weary of suffering. This is the path to purity. All conditioned things all things whatsoever are free of fixed and changing selfhood. When one sees this with insight, one grows weary of suffering. This is the path to purity.
Lovely. Good. Good.
Okay.
Yeah,
go on.
Well, I was thinking my response to that as well, there's Dharma teachings, but also what's become more important for me is, well, maybe a little bit like Garbhavati says, is verses that one can learn off by heart and mantras. So in the dream that I was talking about earlier, where in the dream I really, I was going to die in the dream. I was actually delighted that what came after I had my little tussle with I'm going to die. No, I'm not, I can't. Yes, actually you are, Subhadramati. But the next thing that came into my mind was the mantra that I've been chanting almost every single day for about 35 years. This mantra came into my mind in my dream. And it's the mantra of the Buddha who I visualize every day. And I just was very, very pleased that this mantra came into my mind at what I thought was my moment of death. So it's become, I think I realized that that's why we learn texts off by heart. So lovely to hear you reciting that off by heart, so that when the contents of our mind have become unbound, where there's less and less left to us when we are in that moment of death. What I hope is that maybe what will come to mind is the thing that I've recited most of my life now, more than half my life, my mantra. So that's a very nice question to end with.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Good. So in a moment, Garbhavati is going to lead us in our ritual, which seems very, very apt tonight. As I was saying, that our life itself can become an offering, and that's what we're doing in ritual. We're surrendering ourselves to something that's bigger than the dualistic way in which we see the world. But before that, as we've been doing every night, I want to just say more about the vision of the centre and make an appeal to you to support that vision. So I really was interested in that question, and sort of, that perhaps seeming tension of taking part in the world and withdrawing from the world. And it brought to mind something that we often say about retreats, that we go on retreat in order to deepen our experience of meditation, of all the things we've been talking about. But we go on retreat in order to come back into the world, to contribute to the world. And that's because really it's when we're on retreat that we give ourselves the best conditions to do that. So of course we're on an online retreat, an urban retreat just now, which is absolutely great. And actually there's a real advantage to that because it means we're on retreat in the midst of our real lives. But I must say I'm longing for the day when I can say to all of you, please come on retreat with us if you're for the London Buddhist Centre, to our retreat centre, which is called Vidrasana. Some of you have been, some of you have never seen it yet. And I know that all the leaders in Dublin and Sheffield and Brixton and Cambridge, I know without even asking them that they're longing to say to people, oh, come on retreat with us. You won't believe what can happen on retreat. We're really longing for that day. And I was lucky enough to actually be able to go to our retreat centre for Vidrasana in the last couple of weeks. We've got a little solitary retreat hut, and I was lucky enough to be allowed to go there just for a few days. And it was a very poignant experience because I went to the retreat centre at a time when we should have been having our big summer retreat. And the retreat centre was looking beautiful. The gardens were looking beautiful. And the 3 team who live there and work there, they were keeping it really beautifully, like trimming all the hedges and doing all the lawns. And I could see them like scrubbing all the beautiful cloistered walkway and everything. And there was no one there. There was no one there. And it was so poignant. And it was almost, almost moved me to tears, just that our retreat centre was sitting there empty. And also because it's sitting there empty and because we can't have those retreats, it's just, well, in a way, we're still upkeeping it, but it's meaning that it's sort of draining away our financial resources. Ipolite, who's one of the team on this retreat, but he's also our wonderful treasurer. He said, oh, we're burning £20,000 a month at the retreat centre. I thought that was a very, very graphic way of putting it. And that's why that we here at the London Buddhist Centre, we've set this target of could we raise £20,000 on this retreat? It seems like quite a bold target, but that would mean that at least for 1 month we're not burning £20,000. It would really help us to be able to keep this retreat centre going to such terms as we can invite all of you, which I'd love to do, and I can't wait for those of you who haven't seen it yet to be able to come, and those of you who've been, well, you're probably longing to go back. So really, that's why we're asking you to consider contributing to share in this vision retreats as a place where we really can try and go deeper. And what do we mean by when we talk about meditation? What do we mean when we talk about the vastness of the mind, about human growth and potential? So if that's a vision that inspires you, please consider giving £100, and then all that will mean that we can keep our retreat centre going, keep our Buddhist centre going, and all the other centres can as well. So we're asking for, to consider giving £100, and you can translate that into euros if you're at the Dublin centre, or translate it however you wish, actually. And you can do that if you feel moved to do that. I suggest do it now. We're going to post the button in the link. And when you press that button, and if you're from Brixton, Sheffield, Cambridge or Dublin, you'll be taken to a link for your own centre, and you can contribute to your own centre to keep the vision of your centre, which is the same as our vision, because it's the Dharma vision. It will keep that alive even in this time when our financial resources are not able to be replenished. So that would be that would be wonderful. It just helps to keep the whole thing alive. Thank you. Good. So I'm going to move.
Okay. Thank you so much, Marty.
I'm going to move out and Garabata's going to move in.
So we're just going to reshuffle. So we're going to set ourselves up for a ritual. I'll just come more central, I think.
Go this way.
So it seems like a perfect way to end this evening after Subhadramati's been talking about, seeing our life, seeing our practice as an offering. And we can take the ritual in that spirit, participate in the ritual in that spirit. So I'll call some verses, like beautiful words like poetry, and you can respond. So I won't be able to hear you over the computer or the screen, but in the shrine room, each of us in the room this evening will respond. And we're also going to chant a mantra at the end. So there's 3 stages. It's quite a short ritual, 3 short stages. And at the end, I'll chant a mantra. And you can join in with the mantra. And it's lovely to hear Subhadramati in her dream life, recalling the mantra that she's chanted for so many years. So these mantras, they're sort of like sacred sound, sort of symbols of the enlightened mind, of release, of the ultimate letting go, going beyond self-clinging and discovering something beyond our imagination, something wondrous and beautiful. And rituals are a great way to touch that sense of beauty and wonder. So give yourself over to the ritual, and let's see what happens. So set yourselves up. It's nice to be in a meditation posture, and just take a few moments just to settle. As you're doing that, I'm going to read one of the songs from Milarepa. I'm a yogi who wanders the countryside, a beggar who travels alone, a pauper who's got nothing. I left behind the land of my birth, turned my back on my own fine house, and gave up my fertile fields. I stayed in isolated mountain retreats, practiced in rock caves surrounded by snow, and found food as birds do. That's how it's been up to now. There's no telling the day of my death, but I have a purpose before I die. That's the story of me, the yogi. Now, I'll give you some advice. Trying to control the events of this life, trying to be so clever, always planning to manipulate your world, involved in repetitive social relations. In the midst of these preparations for the future, you arrive unaware at your final years, not realizing your brow is knit with wrinkles, not knowing your hair is turned white, not seeing the skin of your eyes sink down, not admitting the sag of your mouth and nose. Even while chased by the envoys of death, you still sing and rejoice in pleasure, not knowing if life will last till morning. You still make plans for tomorrow's future. Not knowing where rebirth will occur, you still maintain a complacent contentment. Now's the time to get ready for death. That's my sincere advice to you. If its import strikes you, start your practice. The Threefold Puja. Opening reverence. We reverence the Buddha,
We reverence the Buddha,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the perfectly enlightened one,
the shower of the way.
the shower of the way.
We reverence the Dharma,
We reverence the Dharma,
the teaching of the Buddha,
the teaching of the Buddha,
which leads from darkness to light.
which leads from darkness to light.
We reverence the Sangha,
We reverence the Sangha,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
the fellowship of the Buddha's disciples,
which inspires and guides.
which inspires and guides.
Reverence to the three jewels. We reverence the Buddha
We reverence the Buddha
and aspire to follow him.
and aspire to follow him.
The Buddha was born
The Buddha was born
as we are born.
as we are born.
What the Buddha overcame,
What the Buddha overcame,
we too can overcome.
we too can overcome.
What the Buddha attained,
What the Buddha attained,
we too can attain.
we too can attain.
We reverence the Dharma
We reverence the Dharma
and aspire to follow it
and aspire to follow it
with body, speech, and mind
with body, speech, and mind
until the end.
until the end.
The truth in all its aspects,
The truth in all its aspects,
the path in all its stages.
the path in all its stages.
We aspire to study,
We aspire to study,
practice,
practice,
realize.
realize.
We reverence the Sangha
We reverence the Sangha
and aspire to follow it,
and aspire to follow it.
the fellowship of those who tread the way,
The fellowship of those who tread the way,
as one by one.
as one by one.
We make our own commitment,
We make our own commitments,
an ever widening circle.
an ever widening circle.
The Sangha grows.
The Sangha grows.
Offerings to the Buddha. Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer flowers,
we offer flowers.
flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming,
Flowers that today are fresh and sweetly blooming.
flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Flowers that tomorrow are faded and fallen.
Our bodies too,
Our bodies too,
like flowers,
like flowers,
will pass away.
will pass away.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer candles.
we offer candles.
To him who is the light,
To him who is the light,
we offer light.
we offer light.
From his greater lamp,
From his greater lamp,
a lesser lamp we light within us,
a lesser lamp we light within us.
the lamp of Bodhi,
The lamp of Bodhi,
shining within our hearts.
shining within our hearts.
Reverencing the Buddha,
Reverencing the Buddha,
we offer incense.
we offer incense.
Incense whose fragrance pervades the air,
Incense's fragrance pervades the air,
the fragrance of the perfect life,
the fragrance of the perfect life,
sweeter than incense,
sweeter than incense,
spreads in all directions
spreads in all directions
throughout the world.
throughout the world.
Oh, Mani Mani, Mahamani, Shakyamuni, Swaha. Oh, Mani Mani, Mahamani, Shakyamuni, Swaha. Oh, Mani Mani, Mahamani. Swaha. Om Mani 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 Shakyamuni 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 Swaha. Shakyamuni Swaha. Om Mani 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 Shakyamuni